Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts, with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I am the American historian, Alan Searcy. Glad you guys are with me today. Hey, I've been telling you, I've got a big book coming out April 30th, Pistols at Red River. It's the story of Andrew Jackson and the duel he had with Charles Dickinson right there, kind of on the Tennessee-Kentucky line. Jackson was married to a married woman, and, it just followed him. People were whispering the rumors. Jackson got sick of it and called this young man out who'd been talking some smack to him. So I've been kind of digging into duels all over the country, and I wanted to go into one. Actually, it's not really in the U.S. It's actually in Toronto, up in Canada. So I want to tell you about the story I found. This is just totally bananas. So if you're walking through downtown Toronto today, at the corner of Church and King, you'll see St. James Cathedral. It's a beautiful piece of Gothic architecture. But if you step inside the porch, you'll find something that feels like a glitch in the masonry. There's a tombstone, but it's not in the ground. It's embedded directly into the stone wall of the church. Now, the name on it is John Ridout. He was 18 years old when he died, back in 1817. And most people walk past it without a second thought. But that stone is a final, bitter exclamation point on a story that defines the founding of Toronto. It's a story about honor in a town that was basically a swamp. It was a schoolhouse bill that turned into a blood feud, and a teenage boy who made a fatal mistake because his hands were shaking. Today we're peeling back the pavement of modern Toronto to look at muddy York. We're going to talk about the Jarvises, the Ridouts, and the rainy morning at Yonge and College, where the local aristocracy decided that a reputation was worth more than a human life. And this is the story of the Jarvis-Ridout duel. To get why this happened, you have to understand York in 1817. It wasn't the glass and steel metropolis that we know today. It was a tiny, claustrophobic frontier capital. They called it Muddy York for a reason. The roads were basically open bogs. If you were a gentleman, you spent half your time trying to clean your boots. It was just that muddy and dirty there. It was a swamp. So the people running the show were a group called the Family Compact. Think of it as like a colonial mafia of sorts, but with better manners and powdered wigs. These were United Empire loyalists. They had fled the revolution in America to stay under the British crown, and they were obsessed with two things: loyalty and status. The Jarvises and the Ridouts were heavyweights of this circle. They had fought side by side against America in 1812. Samuel Peter Jarvis, the protagonist in all this, though some would call him the villain, was the son of the provincial secretary. The Ridouts were led by Thomas, the surveyor general, and these families were the social fabric of the colony. But in a town of maybe 1,000 people, there isn't much room for two alphas. The cordial relationship between them started to rot over something incredibly petty. It all started with a school trip to Quebec in 1815. So Samuel Jarvis, he escorted his sister and Thomas Ridout's sister to a boarding school. Thomas agreed to cover the expenses for Samuel's sister, with the understanding that Samuel would pay him back. It's, no big deal, right? Except somewhere in the grapevine, the wires, they got crossed. Mrs. Mary Campbell Ridout, the family matriarch, started telling people that the Jarvises were deadbeats. She told the town that Samuel, he couldn't afford to pay his bills. And in York, if someone says you don't pay your debts, your social life's over. Your career's over. Samuel Jarvis demanded a retraction, but the Ridouts refused. What starting as a bookkeeping error became a declaration of war. So, you might ask, why didn't they just go to court? Well, here's the thing about gentlemen in the 19th century. They didn't sue for libel. They fought for satisfaction. So this brings us to the code Duello. The code was a set of 25 rules drafted over in Ireland back in 1777. It was an upper-class ritual designed to regulate violence. It really wasn't a law. In fact, dueling was technically illegal in Canada and most of the United States. But the people making the laws were the ones fighting the duels. So this code, it required quote-unquote seconds. And these were friends of the folks who were fighting who acted as the buffers. Their job was to actually try and stop the duel and negotiate an apology or a truce. But if you were challenged and you didn't want to fight, you were posted. Your name would be tacked to the courthouse door, calling you a coward. You'd be kicked out of your clubs and pretty much just socially erased. And York, the family compact, took this incredibly serious. Even the man who would later preside over Jarvis's murder trial, Judge William Powell, lived by the code. In this world, killing a man in a fair duel, it wasn't murder. It was just a private contract between gentlemen. Well, by 1817, the tension had snapped. The rumors had grown and mutated. There were stories about Jarvis's horse intentionally splashing Mrs. Ridout in the street. And the pressure cooker exploded when 18-year-old John Ridout, a law clerk who was probably trying to prove his manhood, he saw Samuel Jarvis on a street corner. So John didn't just argue. He pulled out a cane and he beat Samuel Jarvis so severely he shattered the bones in Jarvis's right hand. And for a man like Jarvis, being publicly flattened by a teenager was the ultimate indignity. The challenge was issued that night, July 12th, 1817. So they met in a field northwest of Yonge and College. Today that's like a dense urban hub. But back in 1817, it was a cow pasture on the edge of the wild. But here's the thing. It was pouring rain that morning. A heavy, gray summer rain. Because they couldn't keep their gunpowder dry, all four men, Jarvis, Ridout, and their friends who were the seconds, were forced to huddle together inside a small barn to wait for the storm to pass. So just think about it. It's just after 6 a.m. in the morning. The rain isn't just a drizzle. It's a deluge, the heavy rhythmic pounding of rain that turns the world gray. The four of them, the two men who are there to kill each other, and the two men who are there to make sure they do it properly, have to scramble for cover. They duck into a nearby barn, and suddenly, the vastness of the cow pasture shrinks down to the size of a few timber beams. Imagine the dynamics in that room. You've got Samuel Jarvis, 25 years old, nursing a hand that is literally in pieces from the cane beating he took a few days earlier. Every throb of his pulse is a reminder of why he's there. And then you got John Ridout. He's 18 years old. He's a kid. He's likely never looked down the barrel of a loaded gun in his life. And he's standing across from a man who's legally sanctioned to shoot him. And then you have the seconds. Mr. Bolton and Mr. Small. These were the cool heads, the legal minds of York. Their job, according to Code Duello, was to negotiate a peace. Well, they had an hour. One full hour while the rain hammered on the roof to say, enough, this is madness, let's shake hands and just go home. But they didn't. The silence in that barn must have been suffocating. It's a smell of wet wool coats, the sharp metallic scent of gun oil, and the earthy sweet rot of old hay. No one is talking. To speak would break the ritual. So they just stared there at the walls. They watched the water leak through the roof. They waited for the sky to clear just enough so they could step back outside and finish what they started. It wasn't a heat-of-the-moment crime. It was a slow-cooked tragedy. By the time the rain stopped and the light broke through the clouds, any shred of humanity had been replaced by the rigid, cold requirements of the code. With the rain finally stopping, they took their places in the field. 8 yards apart, and that's roughly the length of 2 cars. It's practically an execution distance. So the signal was 1, 2, 3, fire. And you were strictly forbidden from raising your pistol until the word fire was given. So like I mentioned, Jarvis-Ridout, he's a kid. He's terrified. As the count begins, his nerves just snapped. On the count of 2, he raised his pistol and he fired early. The count begins. 1, 2, a flash of lightning, a deafening crack. Jarvis-Ridout's fingers, slick with sweat and just shaking. Pure terror, no 18-year-old should know. Pulled the trigger prematurely. The ball whistles harmlessly into the trees. He missed. For a heartbeat, the world goes silent. The smoke from John's pistol hangs in the damp morning air like a ghost. And in the ringing silence, the reality of the mistake hits that boy like a physical blow. He didn't just miss his target. He forfeited his life. He had broken the sacred rhythm of the duel. Panicked, breathless, John cried out, "I hope I have not hurt you." He begins to back away, his empty pistol hanging limp at his side. His hands coming up in a desperate, instinctive plea for mercy. He's a child again, looking for a way out of this nightmare. But the gentleman in the field, he doesn't move. Doesn't offer a hand. Henry Bolton, the man supposed to be the cool head of the group, the second, he stepped forward not to stop the killing, but to enforce the ritual. He barks at the teenager to get back on his mark. He reminds him of the cold, iron logic of the code. John has had his turn. Now he must stand still and become a target. Imagine Jarvis-Ridout forced to return to that spot in the mud, standing there, unarmed, watching Samuel Jarvis. Jarvis doesn't rush. He doesn't let the boy off with a warning shot in the air. He could have eloped, took a shot, walked away. He takes his shattered, bandaged right hand, the hand John broke with that cane, and he gripped the wood of the pistol. He braced himself. He leveled the heavy barrel, squinting through the sights, taking a slow, deliberate aim at the boy's throat. Then, the second crack. The ball tears through John's neck, and the force of it dropped him instantly. He doesn't die like a hero in a play. He collapsed into the long, wet grass of the meadow, gasping, his life's blood spilling out in the very mud that started this whole mess. By the time the seconds reach him, the light's already leaving his eyes. In that field northwest of Yonge and College, the honor of the Jarvis family, it was finally restored, but at the cost of a boy who died apologizing to his killer. Samuel Jarvis, he was tried for murder, but in a town run by his friends, the jury returned a no guilty verdict in just a few minutes. Jarvis went on to have a huge career. He married the judge's daughter, like I said. He has a street named after him today in Toronto. So on paper, he won. But he never won the war against Mary Campbell Ridout. For over a decade, Mary became the living conscience of York. Every Sunday, she dressed in black and stood in the porch of St. James Cathedral. As the Jarvis family and Henry Bolton walked out of the service, she would stand before them and solemnly curse them in front of the entire congregation. She made sure that every time they tried to feel like gentlemen, they had to look her in the eyes. They killed her son, left him in a cow pasture. And that's why the tombstone is in the wall today. When the old churchyard was cleared, the Ridouts ensured John's stone wasn't just moved. It was built in the very structure of the church, where his mother had stood her ground. So if you ever go to Toronto, and you're stuck in traffic on Jarvis Street, think about that rainy morning in 1817. History isn't just about winners, whose names are on the signs. Sometimes it's about the stones, right there in the wall. So yeah, I've been telling you guys, send me questions on Facebook, Instagram. Go to Southern Goat Stories on Facebook, Instagram. Send me some questions. I plan on doing a Q&A in another week or two. I'm trying to answer a few. And someone, I guess about 2 or 3 weeks ago, sent me a question. Hey, talk about some of the haunted places you've been in. So each week I've been trying to tell a story about a place I've been in, some weird things have happened. Springhaven, Hendersonville, Tennessee. So this house was built in 1820. It's a big, beautiful mansion. I'm walking through it with an empath. And the whole time we're there, she's coming into this blind. She doesn't know anything about the house or the history. She's from New Mexico. So I invited her to come with me to tour the house, talk to the owner. We're walking through, she tours the house. And at the end of the tour, we told her about some of the things that happened there. The house, they skirmished there in the Civil War. It was a whole lot of history there. So we're doing the tour. And finally, she goes up to Danny, the owner, and she said, who is Elizabeth? So Danny, the owner, he was kind of taken aback. Who is Elizabeth? He had the papers there, all the history of the house, and he went to get them. And most of the night, he'd been talking about James Armsfeld, one of the guys who owned the house, and also Miss Britton, who had lived there, I guess, most of the 20th century. So he goes and gets these papers, he brings them back, and turns out that Miss Britton's name was Liz, Elizabeth Britton. So it's just wild that she walked through the house and knew the name of the owner. She told me and Danny that night that because Springhaven is an old mansion, 1820, like I said, but today it's like a bridal venue. It's a really nice house. Taylor Swift actually shot some kind of a photo shoot there for a country music magazine or something. But yeah, you can Google Taylor Swift, Springhaven. It should pop up. But yeah, she walked through the mansion and she picked up, Elizabeth Britton. Elizabeth was the lady who owned the house. And she had no way of knowing that, but she figured out that was the name of the owner, or the old owner. But it's kind of wild because Miss Britton's husband, he died in the house also. He was out working in the yard one day, got really hot, came inside, sat on the couch, and had a heart attack and died. And in that room where he died, they've seen like a large shadow back there in the black closet, walking towards people, moving swiftly, scaring the fire out of them. So we did an investigation there, and I remember there's also a building out back. It's built in 1806, and I remember we did my buddy has a geoport, supposedly can scan radio waves and pick up messages from beyond, or I'm not sure the science, but I know it does something because I saw it. So we're sitting there, and we're trying to ask questions, kind of trying to communicate, and we're just getting nothing. So finally I said, who is the president of the United States? And out of his box, it goes, Lincoln. Like, it's clear as day. So that's one thing I found, doing these investigations. It's sometimes it's hard to make contact. But if you can ask, hey, who was the president or something like that, you'll get an answer. I know I've done them before. I've got like President Johnson. I've gotten Polk. I mean, people know who the president is in their time. So, chances are whatever's in these places is probably from a different time period, but they know who the president is. That's kind of what I got. So, let's try to wrap this thing up. But make sure you check out the books. All my books are on Audible. They're all on Kindle. You type in Southern Ghost Stories. Type in Alan Searcy. You can follow me on Twitter, Alan Searcy. Go to Facebook, Instagram, Southern Ghost Stories. Follow me on there. Yeah, leave a review for the podcast. Did a contest. I'll announce some winners probably next show or two. But leave a review, take a screenshot. Those are great. Really help the show. So check back on Thursday Friday. I've got another show dropping. Some really cool stuff. I kind of want to go in a different direction. May go out west. So check back in a couple of days, and I'll see y'all then. Check out the exclusive shirts from Monster City Madhouse, Gravestone, Rocktober, and Val Halloween. All that and much more at MonsterCityMadhouse.com.